Okay, good. It is time to start now, and I want to welcome everyone here tonight to where we're starting out with um, chapter with the second book of Samuel, Second Samuel, and then we'll just work our way through that one and keep on trucking then. And I've got several things that I still am collecting as we go along from various sources of, like the Biblical Archaeology Review and um, the other one is the Biblical Archaeology Society and stuff like that. They send me stuff from time to time that really makes it or there's some good stuff in there about the archaeology of the area and digging stuff up and finding getting the dirt on stuff. So um, anyway, yeah, as we go further into this stuff, I find more and more articles the uh, on the archaeology of the area. So let's go ahead with the blessing then. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who sanctifies us with his commandments and commands us to engross ourselves in the words of Torah. So I want to welcome everyone here, and hopefully those of you that have been um, quarantined or whatever the word is when you're healthy, um, that you're going to get back to uh, getting out and about a little bit. And we're looking forward to this weekend where a number of you are going to be coming out to our house, and we even have some folks that are have not actually they've never visited our congregation though, and they've been wanting to for the last 2 months. So they said, well, uh, I invited them to come to our house, and so some of them said, yeah, they will. They're going to be coming to our house. So that's going to be exciting too, to bring to get some people out here that have never been part of our congregation yet, and they're going to be out here. So that's going to be fun too. So all right, well, let's go ahead then, and we're going to go in chapters 1 and 2, the death of Saul. Now, here is our little chronology, and we're down, right here at this mark right here is where we're at, and probably just going to go ahead and take this timeline out. For next week, but I think it does give us a good start right here. All right, and then of course the chronology that I'll stay up with, because now we're going to start actually getting into some of this stuff that happened with David. And here we are right now at the year 1011 BCE, and David is at the ripe old age of 30 years old, and he becomes king of Judah. So that's an awful young king, but he sure had stacked an awful lot of experience into those years, from his anointing by Samuel at at the age of what, somewhere around 12 to 15, something like that, to now here he is 30 years old and finally gets to be the king of Judah. Now and here's this one here. Really, they haven't changed a whole lot. We haven't gotten into some of the other things yet. So this was the mushy timeline that we had talked about here, is where some things are just not as clear as we'd like to see them. And so now I got this timeline here, or it's actually just kind of a chart that shows you where we're going to be in the book of Second Samuel each week, and they got right now we're going to be here, these first two chapters, and it kind of gives some order and structure to our study. So let me do one other thing here. Okay, so as we noted, like the last time we got together, and the first, when I was first talking about, got into First Samuel, that actually First Samuel and Second Samuel in the Hebrew Bible was actually just one book. And then the Septuagint, the Greek version of the Bible, they split it up into two books, and it's pretty much stayed that way now. Even in the JPS, the traditional Jewish Bibles now, the Tanakh, they do have a First and Second Samuel in a lot of the versions, and so the book um, doesn't name a specific author, if you remember, but the material was compiled from documents written and collected by the prophets Nathan, Gad, and Samuel. And then, of course, the book is named after Samuel. And we find that in First Chronicles 29:29. So he's the one that kind of put it all together. So Second Samuel now is it is set almost totally in the land of Israel. I mean, everything is happening. That they make some excursions over into Philistine land or Phoenician land or whatever, but for the most part, it's going to be focused right in Israel, and the time frame of it is going to be from where David becomes king in 1011 BCE to when he dies at 971 BCE. So there's a total of 40 years as king. So what's so important about Second Samuel? Now, we knew that First Samuel introduced the monarchy of Israel, and then Second Samuel, it chronicles the establishment, as if you were, would the establishment of David's dynasty, the Davidic dynasty, and the expansion of Israel under God's chosen leader, because Israel, the land of Israel, from the conquest, and even under Saul, it wasn't all that large, and that David expands it a good bit, and Solomon even more so. And so the book, starts with David learning that Saul was killed, uh, and it probably happened about the same time that David was out fighting he had left Ziklag and went down to retrieve his wives, and so he was down there fighting at the same time Saul was up at Mount Gilboa, and that's where he died. So um, the lament that we're going to talk about here in a little bit over the deaths of Saul and Jonathan, um, it kind of it demonstrates David's personal grief over their demise. Jonathan was his best friend, kind of an unlikely friendship, because Jonathan was like 20 years older than David was, and he was already a field commander in the army when David was born, and so um, then the Lord set David over the tribe of Judah, and then over all of Israel as the anointed king, and he united all of the tribes together into one tight knit nation, and that's the first time that had ever happened. Now, the first 10 chapters will show that David is he's victorious in battle. He's got all of the blessings of the Lord, and so this country, the nation of Israel, is also blessed, and he's praised by the people, and he's kind, he's compassionate to the sick and the poor and the righteous. Then We see David dance before the Lord in the streets of Jerusalem as his men bring back the Ark of the Covenant in chapters 12 to 16. And then we also meet Mephibosheth, the crippled son of Jonathan, and John and David, extended him grace because of his father Jonathan. So, um, and we also find that the biblical writers are just they're just terribly honest. They don't overlook the hero's flaws, and that's kind of fortunate, actually, when you consider that you can read the Bible and you don't have to feel so awful terrible because everybody in the Bible is perfect and you're not. No, we see that the heroes in the Bible are terribly flawed people too. They're just like you and me. They're just regular folks trying to get along. And in in these chapters with David, we see that we'll note that David's adultery with Bathsheba. Then he the consequences of that union were the death of their son. David's daughter Tamar is raped by his son Amnon, and then Amnon is murdered by Absalom. Then Absalom tries to overthrow David, and then Absalom dies. So David's life was a mess. He was doing great until he you know until his little tryst with Bathsheba. Even though he married her, he had to kill her husband or have her husband dispatched so that he could marry her. So David was definitely not a perfect man. And so, despite all the turmoil of his later years, David did enjoy the Lord's forgiveness and favor. His genuine sorrow and his regret over his sins revealed that David was really, had a repentant heart, which the Lord was pleased. And so the central theme, I would say, of Second Samuel, or the overarching thing, the most important thing, is that David's kingdom would be an everlasting kingdom. Now, uh, actually, it's key to this book and the entire biblical record is 2 Samuel 7:16. We'll get to that in 2 or 3 weeks. It says, "Your house and your kingdom shall endure before me forever. Your throne shall be established forever." Now, this divine promise marked the beginning of an additional covenant called the Davidic covenant, in which God promised an eternal throne to the house of David because of David's faith. Now, God did not treat David's descendants as he treated Saul's descendants, because sin would be punished, but David's line would never be completely cut off. And David celebrated God's faithfulness in Psalms 89. He actually wrote these words. I've copied a little bit of it here. It says, "I will not violate my covenant nor alter what my lips have uttered. Once for all I have sworn by my holiness, surely I will not lie to David. His descendants will endure forever, and his throne as the sun before me, and as the moon forever, established forever, and a trustworthy witness in the sky." Now, God's unconditional promise to David would be fulfilled. How did that happen? Because we know there's no monarchy left in Israel, and the kings, they all got killed off. Well, it was fulfilled in David's most famous descendant, and that would be Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus, the Messiah. And the covenant also included a continuing promise that the people of Israel would have a land of their own forever. And okay, I'm just not. I just happened to look there and I don't see the recording thing, but it does say that I'm recording here. So I don't want to be like I was on Shabbat, where I'm going along there just really good, and then realized that people started calling me on the phone, calling Pat and everything. Said, "Hey, you never punched the start button on Facebook." So didn't want to be like that tonight. So, all right. So we're getting into chapter 1. David, he returned to Ziklag. I'm going to go ahead and read it. And 2 Samuel chapter 1 says, "Now it came to pass after the death of Saul, when David had returned from the slaughter of the Amalekites, that David stayed 2 days in Ziklag. On the third day, behold, a man came from Saul's camp with his clothes torn and dust on his head. And when he approached David, he fell to the ground and prostrated himself. Then David asked him, 'Where are you coming from?' He said, 'I've escaped from the camp of Israel,' he answered. 'How did things go?' David asked. 'Please tell me.' He answered, 'The troops fled the battlefield. Also, many of the troops fell and died, and even Saul, his son Jonathan, are dead.' David asked the young man, informing him, 'How did you know that Saul and his son Jonathan are dead?' The young man, informing him, answered, 'I happened by chance to be on Mount Gilboa and took Saul, and look, Saul was leaning on his spear while the chariots and the horsemen were closing in on him. When he turned around and saw me, he called me. So I answered, "Here am I." And then he asked me, "Who are you?" So I answered him, "I am an Amalekite." And he said to me, "Stand now over me and kill me, for I'm in agony, yet I'm still alive." So I stood over him and killed him, because I knew he couldn't survive after he had fallen. So I took the crown that was on his head and bracelet that was on his arm and brought them here to my Lord. Now, the young Amalekite there, he must have been a mercenary soldier that had joined Saul's army, and it seems more likely, probably, that his account of Saul's demise, Saul's death, was not totally accurate. Rather, than he he probably didn't have a hand in killing Saul. Maybe not. And it's hard to say. Other parts of the Bible, though, says that Saul fell on his sword and he died. And so this guy is telling David that he killed him. So it's possible that that account was true, and that even after Saul fell on his sword, that he didn't die immediately, and he asked the Amalekite to finish him off. So um, we know, though, that the Amalekite was able to take Saul's crown and the bracelet, and probably returned to David with his story to ingratiate himself with David. And so, and especially if the guy is a mercenary, he's keen on how to make himself look good, and always looking for the idea of having money, being able to profit from whatever he did. So um, Mount Gilboa, it's about 80 miles north of Ziklag, and so it probably took the guy 3 or 4 days to make the trip, because it's a average traveler in biblical times could normally cover about 20 miles a day by walking. And so I think it's kind of ironic here that God had commanded Saul to annihilate all the Amalekites. That was back in 1 Samuel 15. And David had just returned from slaughtering a bunch of the Amalekites. Um, and so now one of them has claimed to kill the king who disobeyed God by not killing all of the Amalekites. And so we'd also know later that there was a descendant of King Agag, uh, who um, caused his name was Haman, and he caused all sorts of trouble for the Jewish people in the diaspora in Persia. Now, David asked the Amalekite um, uh, who he was, and the young man explained that he was an Amalekite. And then David asked him where he came from, which, that seemed kind of unnecessary since the guy told him he was an Amalekite. But David was trying to figure out, okay, is he from, outside of Israel, or was he living in Israel, or whatever? And the young man explained to him that he was the son of an alien. So that kind of made him a protected foreigner in Israel, because remember, God said, okay, the foreigner that's living among you, they have the same rights and privileges that you do. And so maybe David didn't understand how someone who lived in Israel could fail to understand that that he respected Saul's life and did not want to kill him. So the Amalekite soldier undoubtedly thought David would have been glad that Saul had finally died, since Saul had been chasing David around for 10 years. And David had been running from Saul for that whole 10 years. And, he'd never had a minute's peace. And so you can compare that to Doeg, the Edomite, who was very willing to go and kill all of the priests, God's anointed priests at Nob, just to please Saul. So the Amalekite here brought things to David that, the emblems of the kingship, his crown, and it was probably just a small metallic cap or a wreath that encircled the temples. And I think I might even, yeah, here's some pictures of Middle Eastern jewelry. This over here is a kind of a crown, and this here, I don't know what pieces are, but this could have been an armband, or this could have been an armband, or whatever. Um, and these are, because these are certainly not shown here to scale with each other, but it could have been something ornate like this, or it could have been something that would have been more suited for battle. We don't really know, but it was obvious that um, David knew what this was. It was emblems of the kingship, and and also the bracelet or the armlet that it was worn above the elbow, and it was an ancient mark of royal stature, royal dignity. So, any comments or questions so far that anybody might have? Okay, you know the rules. Just unmute yourself anytime you are. All right, so then David took hold of his clothes, and he ripped them. He tore his own clothes, and so did all the men that were with him. And they mourned, wept, and fasted until evening for Saul and his son Jonathan, for the troops of Adonai, and for the house of Israel, because they had fallen by the sword. Then David said to the young man who informed him, "Where are you from?" And he says, "I am the son of an Amalekite outsider," he replied. Then David said to him, "How is it that you were not afraid to stretch out your hand to destroy Adonai's anointed one?" Then David called one of the young men and said, "Come and strike him down." And he struck him down, and he died. David said to him, "Your blood is on your own head, for your mouth testified against you, saying, I killed Adonai's anointed." So that was kind of a turn of events there. I got a picture of what the an Iron Age warrior might have looked like back in those days, and with their shield and and their armor and so forth. Just all right. So the news that Saul's death, it was very devastating to David. It made him very sad instead of happy. Saul was the Lord's anointed. All the 11 references to the Lord's anointed in the Tanakh, except for the one in Lamentations 4:20, they all appear in First and Second Samuel. So this phrase emphasizes the close relationship between Adonai and the king. So um, also David's soul brother there, Jonathan, had died, and as had many other Israelite soldiers. So they were sad for all of that. And David, he must have believed this soldier, this Amalekite, that he had executed or he had killed Saul. So that's why he had him executed, because he said, "Your blood is on your own head." That means that the blood that you have shed is the cause of your own death. So, David had had two opportunities to kill Saul earlier, and he had not done so because Saul was God's anointed. Then um, David, going ahead in verse 17. Then David chanted this lament over Saul and his son Jonathan, and ordered that the sons of Judah be taught the song of the bow. Behold, it is written in the book of Jasher. Your glory, O Israel, is slain on your high places. How the mighty have fallen. Tell it not in Gath, proclaim it not in Ashkelon streets, lest Philistine daughters rejoice, lest daughters of the uncircumcised gloat. Hills of Gilboa, let no dew or rain be on you, nor on bountiful fields, for there the shield of the mighty ones lay defiled. Saul's shield will no longer be anointed with oil. From the blood of the slain, from the fat of the mighty, Jonathan's bow never turned back. Saul's sword never returned empty. Saul and Jonathan loved and delighted, parted neither in life nor death. They were swifter than eagles, stronger than the lions. Daughters of Israel, weep over Saul, who clothed you in scarlet and finery, who put ornaments of gold on your clothes. How the mighty have fallen in the midst of the battle. Jonathan on your heights is slain. I am distressed for you, my brother Jonathan. Very pleasing were you to me. Wonderful was your love to me, more than the love of women. How the mighty have fallen and the weapons of war destroyed. Okay. And before anybody gets any ideas there, verse 26 there, it says, "Wonderful was your love to me, more than the love of women." Um, you can actually look online. You can see where certain groups say, "Well, see there that Jonathan and David had this homosexual relationship here. That's crazy, because that would have been an abomination. That was sin, and all of all the other sins of David were exposed. So I'm sure that one would have been too, had that been the case. But no, what he's saying is that relationship that he had with Jonathan, the trust that he had, and just the admiration that he had. Because remember, Jonathan was over 20 years older than David. Is that meant more to him than the love of women, and so that had to be a lot, because David was quite known for his love of women. So and then he follows it off, how the mighty have fallen and the weapons of war destroyed. Now it's interesting to note that David's eulogy of Saul made no references at all to his faults and his sins. And it's proper that he would have said these things in that way, and he didn't bring up all of the bad things, because when you're doing a eulogy, that's what you do. You bring out the good points in a person. You don't just air all of their ugliness when you're doing a eulogy. So that's what we do today. That's what David did back then, and and it says that the lament here was recorded in the book of Jasher. Well, the book of Jasher has not survived. Okay, there is a book of Jasher that is currently circulating around in Messianic circles, um, but it is not authentic. Okay, it is in my estimation. I've read through the thing a couple of times and compared it with other literature and so forth, and I just the circumstances of its discovery and all that. In my mind, it is not an authentic book. So don't put, I wouldn't put any stock in this book of Jasher. I've got it someplace. Yeah, I've got it someplace over there on my bookshelf. I don't know where it's at this point, but I have those kind of things because I read them, because people ask me, well, what do you think of this or that and the other? And um, no, the Book of Jasher is not authentic, and so don't put any stock in it. The wording there, how the mighty are fallen. That is that's an expression that it gets repeated. It has been repeated innumerable times at the funerals of great men, and here it begins and closes this eulogy that David had uh, for Saul. So okay, we finished that first chapter of Second Samuel. Any comments or questions?
I read what I thought was the book of Jasher, but it seemed to be basically a parallel of the book of Genesis. I never saw anything that went as far as First Samuel. So at one time, did this thing cover a lot more years than Genesis?
Well, yeah, that's the thing. I mean, it says right here that it was put in the book of Jasher, and so the original book of Jasher did not survive. It has not survived at all. Not even little, I mean, little fragments or this and that and the other. And the one that you see that's circulated around, it was discovered in some library or something that is associated with the Latter-day Saints, and it's just remarkable how much of the book of Jasher coincides or parallels that theology of the Mormons. Yeah,
I've read the Book of Mormon, and there again, it's I don't think there's any archaeological evidence. This is supposed to be taking place in North America here, and
right.
How you get from the east to the west that fast or whatever. It must have been in Florida, and yet the climate doesn't describe that. So yeah, it doesn't seem to have any validity.
Right, and that's what I say. This book of Jasher, it was discovered by a Mormon researcher, and it just so conveniently parallels Mormon mythology. So I mean, it's um, uh, that's why I tell people, I I've actually kind of gotten a little bit overboard. I guess I was not the nicest, kindest person in a Bible study one time where we were studying the book of Genesis, and this fellow said, "Yes, but the book of Jasher says." And basically, he was saying, "Well, you can't go by what the Bible said, what the Genesis said, because the book of Jasher had a different take on it." And so let's just say I got a little louder than my normal self, because I'd had it with that group of folks and their books, their extra biblical books that would always trump the Bible so that it would match their theology. And so after that, I left that. I was in a group, and we just left there and went somewhere else. But yeah, so yeah, Jasher, just stay away from it. It's not that valuable to you. So let's go ahead into Samuel, 2 Samuel 2. Now it came to pass that after this, David inquired of Adonai, saying, "Shall I go up to one of the towns of Judah?" Adonai said to him, "Go up." "Where shall I go up?" David asked. To Hebron, he said. So David went up there along with his two wives, Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail, the widow of Nabal the Carmelite. David also brought up his men that were with him, each with his household, and they settled in the towns of Hebron. Then the men of Judah came there and anointed David king over the house of Judah. Then they told David, saying, it was the men of Jabesh Gilead who buried Saul. So again, we see that David inquired of the Lord as to what was his next step. The narrative does not record that he asked God whether he, remember when he left the service of Saul, and he was hiding from Saul, and so he says, well, he's going to find me eventually, so I'm going to go over and hang out with the Philistines. So the Bible doesn't record that David went and said, inquired of the Lord, and then discovered, to say, okay, Lord, should I go over there and hang out with the Philistines until Saul dies? No, that didn't happen. So, and there's a lot of really dicey stuff that could have happened to David during that time, and it probably took a while because he was with the Philistines, that the northern tribes didn't trust him so much, and so hopefully he learned a lesson, and that he would put God's will, the will of God, first in his life rather than what he really wanted to do. So we don't know what method method David used to inquire of the Lord, because asking, should I go up to Judah? Should I leave the Philistines here? Is what he's asking, and that would have been easy for the Urim and Thummim, the two rocks. It was either a yes or a no. But then asking where I should go, that would have been more difficult. We don't know how that happened, whether he did a series of elimination, or if there was some kind of other divine revelation. We don't know. It just said that he did inquire of the Lord. So in the end, God told him to go to Hebron. Now, he had spent a lot of his outlaw years in that general vicinity. His wives were from that general area, and the people there had a very high regard for him, because he had protected them from marauders, and he had taken care of the folks there. And so he brought all of his men there, and so by doing so, they would feel like, okay, now we're safe from any Philistine incursions, or the Amalekites, or the all the other ites that were around there. So the men of Judah came to David, and they anointed him as the king of Judah. And then they told him about, while they were doing this, they told him, says, hey, the men of Jabesh Gilead, when Saul was slain, and they hung his body up on the wall, they went and retrieved the bodies of Saul and his sons and gave them proper burials. And so that would have been a very high risk operation, to go up there where they'd stuck these bodies up on the wall, or on poles on the before the wall, and just kind of hung them up there as war prizes. So David, going ahead in verse 5, David sent messengers to the men of Jabesh Gilead, and said to them, blessed are you of Adonai for showing this kindness to Saul your Lord by burying him. So now may Adonai show you kindness and faithfulness, and I also will show you goodness, because you have done this thing. Now therefore be strong and brave, for Saul your Lord is dead. And then it just drops in this little phrase at the bottom, and says, and also the house of Judah has anointed me king over them. And so he's given these guys kudos for doing this mitzvah of getting Saul's body and his son's bodies and burying them properly, and saying, yeah, this is a good thing that you did. And oh, by the way, I'm king in Judah now, and just kind of let that drop there on him. And so that's the first thing that David did as the king was, send a messenger or a letter or however he did it to these men at Jabesh Gilead. And I just think it's kind of cool. He thanked them for their kindness, and then, oh, by the way, I'm the king of Judah now. And so going ahead, now Abner, son of Ner, Saul's army commander, had taken Saul's son Ishbosheth and brought him over to Mahanaim. Now that's Mahanaim is, okay, let's get over here. Mahanaim, if I got yeah, okay. I've got a map here. And you guys, if I'm not advancing these screens like I should be, it's okay to say, "Hey, advance the screen," because I get wound up in telling the story. Mahanaim is right over here. You see it, so that's where Ishbosheth set up his reign over there. I guess he must have figured that it was a little safer because all this area up and around in here, the Philistines had occupied. And so Ishbosheth, the name, what it means, his name means, it means man of shame. Ish meaning the man, and Bosheth is shame. So kind of a strange name that you're going to name your kid. But anyway, that's what he was known by. And so then he made him king. This Abner made him king over Gilead, Asher, Jezreel, Ephraim, Benjamin, and over all Israel. Saul's son Ishbosheth was 40 years old when he began to reign over Israel, and he reigned for 2 years. But the house of Judah followed David. The time that David was king in Hebron over the house of Judah was 7 years and 6 months. So Abner was the army commander. He was the chief of staff there, whatever you want to call him, for Saul. And somehow, evidently, this guy Abner saw when things were going to be going south on him, that either he grabbed Ishbosheth and took him away, or that he was not in the battle. We don't know, but said that he took him over to Mahanaim, which is across the Jordan River. So that's kind of a natural barrier there, and so then all of the northern tribe areas, then they eventually acknowledged Ishbosheth as their king. Now, one of the commentators that I was reading said that it took Abner like 5.5 years to convince all of these other tribes there, Gilead and Asher and all them, to accept Ishbosheth. And so he was 40 years old by the time that this happened. And so he was a king of all of those for just 2 years. And at that time, David was king in Hebron over the house of Judah. That was for 7 years and 6 months, it says. So while David is down here in Hebron, Ishbosheth is over here. But David had already been king for 5.5 years before Ishbosheth became the king over these northern tribes. So now going ahead here, once Abner, son of Ner, and the troops of Saul's son Ishbosheth went out from Mahanaim and to Gibeon. So they left over here at Mahanaim, and they went down here to Gibeon, which you see is right under the N in Benjamin. All right. So meanwhile, Joab, son of Zeruiah, the troops of David went out, and they met each other by the pool of Gibeon, so that they sat down, one group on one side of the pool, the other on the other side of the pool. Then Abner said to Joab, "Now let the young men get up and compete before us." "Let them get up," Joab replied. Then they got up and came forward by number, 12 for Benjamin and for Saul's son, and 12 from David's servants. Then each grabbed his opponent by the head, and they thrust his sword in his opponent's side, so that they all fell down together. I think that's kind of a obtuse way of saying that they fought to a draw. That each guy, at the end of the day, there were 24 guys dead there instead of like 12 to nothing, or even 7-5 or whatever, how that would have worked out. But he said, therefore that place is called Helkath Hazurim, which is in Gibeon. The battle was very fierce that day, and Abner and the men of Israel were defeated before David's servant. So evidently they got together and they parlayed. All right, now this is that very same pool at Gibeon. So, I mean, here you had some guys, some of Abner's guys over here with, he was with Ishbosheth, and then you had Joab over here, David's troops, and they're all sitting around across the pool from each other, and discussing, okay, how are we going to do this? This was kind of, they were trying to set up a peace treaty here, so that they wouldn't go to war. And also, I just showed you this little deal here of the pool. It was either a cistern, we don't really know for sure. It was either a cistern or that they just dug down to get down to the water table. So I have been in some cisterns over there in Israel that cement slurry that they put on there, that stuff is so good it still seals today, because when it rains the things will fill up with water, and they'll hold water for a good long time. Even up in Masada, they still had water down in some of those cisterns. Okay, that was a rabbi trail. Just sorry about that. So anyway, they got together here and they said, okay, well, look, rather than all of us fight each other, let's take 12 of our guys and 12 of your guys, and let's duke it out. Whoever wins, wins. And I don't know what the terms of the surrender or whatever would have been, whether that Ishbosheth would have been the king over everything, or David would have been king over everything. It didn't say. But when these guys fought to a draw, then that's when at that point, it was Katie bar the door. No, no holds barred. They were everybody was fighting then. And so at the end of the day, the Abner and the men of Israel up there, the Ishbosheth's troops, they were defeated by David's servants, which really only stands to reason because David had been fighting for 10 years almost daily, and these other guys possibly not so much. That they didn't have a standing army, whereas David did. So anyway, now the three sons of Zeruiah were Joab, that's the general, Abishai, that's his brother, and Asael. And Asael says he was swift-footed as one of the gazelles of the field. Asael pursued Abner, not swerving to the right nor to the left from pursuing Abner. Then Abner looked behind him and said, "Is that you, Asael?" And he said, "It is I," he answered. So Abner said to him, turn away to your right or to your left. Seize one of the young men and take his armor for yourself. But Asael would not turn away from following him. Once again, Abner warned Asael, turn away from pursuing me. Why should I strike you to the ground? How would I ever look your brother Joab in the face? But he refused to turn aside. So Abner struck him with the butt end of the spear in the groin, so that the spear came out through his back, and he fell down there and died on the spot. Then all who came to the place where Asael had fallen, they just stood still. In other words, they just looked and go, wow. So Joab was there with his two brothers, Abishai and Asael. And Josephus records that this guy Asael said he could outrun horses, that he was so fast. And that sounds a little hyperbolic, but anyway, he pursued Abner. He was going after this guy Abner. He was going to get him, and Abner's just basically begging him, just don't stop. Why don't you go and fight somebody that you can defeat? In other words, you cannot beat me, so just don't try. And Asael said, no way, I'm going after you. And so we don't know whether Abner just kind of took his spear and put it behind him, or who knows? Whatever happened, the butt end of that spear, which uh, well, who knows if it was also kind of sharpened or not? We don't know. Anyway, it was sharpened enough that it went up in the underside of his abdomen and out the his back, and of course that would have killed him, because there's just all sorts of vascular entities there. Then he would have bled out pretty quickly. And then it said that where he was there, that everybody that would go by, they were just astonished. They were shocked at this could happen to Asael, because my goodness, he was such a fast runner. How could this happen to him? And so then we'll finish this off with Joab and Abishai continued pursuing Abner. As the sun was setting, they reached the hill of Ammah. Okay. And so here is Ammah, which faces a place called Gia, on the road. In the scripture here, it's called it Gia, but I don't see a name over here. On the road to the wilderness of Gibeon, and they may have been talking about this town here called Geba. So anyway, then the sons of Benjamin rallied to Abner and became one group, taking their stand on top of one of the hills. Then Abner called out to Joab and said, must the sword devour forever? Don't you realize how bitter it will be in the end? How long until you order the people to stop pursuing their kinsmen? As God lives, Joab replied, if you had not spoken, then surely the people would have gone up until the morning, everyone after his kinsman. So Joab blew the shofar, and all the soldiers halted and pursued Israel no more, nor did they continue to fight any longer. So Abner and his men marched all that night through the Arabah. Then they crossed over the Jordan and marched through all morning until they reached Mahanaim. Joab returned from pursuing Abner, and when he had gathered all of the troops, 19 of David's soldiers besides Asael were missing. But David's soldiers had struck down many of Benjamin and Abner's men, so that 360 died. Then they took up Asael, buried him in his father's tomb, which was in Bethlehem. And Joab and his men marched all night until the day dawned on them at Hebron. So basically, these guys, even though Asael had been killed, Joab and Abishai then kept going after Abner. And as the sun was going down, they finally Abner and his troops, they had finally gotten up on top of this hill, higher ground, makes it easier for them to defend, and all of his troops, the sons of Benjamin, basically that's what they're talking about is Israel. They rallied around Abner, and then once again became a cohesive fighting group, and they were going to make their stand up on top of this hill. So then you see Abner is surrounded by Joab. So Abner called out to Joab and said, basically, hey, look, can't we stop this? How long are we going to be killing each other? We're killing our families. You're killing our kinsmen. We're all related. We are all part of Isaac, Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. We're killing each other off here. Are we going to do this forever? It's going to do is end in bitterness and bad feelings, and so when are we going to stop this? And so Joab actually made a kind of he swore by Adonai, which you're not supposed to do, but that was what he did. He said, if you had not spoken out, basically, had you not said this, we were going to come up that hill and kill every one of you. We were just ready to do that. We got the troops to do it, and we would have done it. We would have killed all of you had you not said this. So basically, he recognized that Abner didn't have the fight in him anymore. He didn't want to fight anymore. And, possibly Joab didn't either. I mean, the idea of civil strife, civil war is never good. And so Joab blew the shofar, and all the soldiers halted, and they didn't fight Israel anymore. They didn't pursue them. They didn't fight them, or anything like that. And so they all just decided, okay, you go this way. And so Abner and his troops headed east across the almost said the Rio Grande, across the Jordan River. Okay, you can tell I'm from Texas. Okay, across the Jordan River over to Mahanaim, and then Joab and his troops headed south back to Hebron, and on the way they picked up Asael, and they buried him in the family tomb there in Bethlehem. So everybody marched all night and got back to their homes, and they didn't fight any longer. And that ends this chapter. Now, next week, we'll see where there's a continuation, and it, again, does not end well for some folks. And so we'll get into that. Are there any comments or questions that anyone might have tonight? Okay, I just unmuted everybody, I think. Let's see. Let me okay, now I've unmuted everybody if you wanted to talk. Anybody? I guess not, huh? Okay. I'm hoping that there will be, let's see if I got some other, that was the last of the pictures that I had here, because I do like to put out the maps and pictures of where these places are. Sometimes, I mean, they're nothing but ruins, but you kind of get a feel for, okay, where does this look like? What does this look like out here in the middle of nowhere? And like when you look at stand on the hilltop that is Megiddo and you look out over the Armageddon Valley, you can get in your mind some of the pictures of the battles that were, and some of the battles that are yet to come. And so that's why I try to put those things out there for you to see. Okay, any comments or questions? And if not, I'm gonna stop the recording, and just wish everyone Shavua Tov, and hopefully you had a meaningful Memorial Day today and tomorrow for those of you in the United States. And then next week is Shavuot, and wherever you may be, that you can celebrate Shavuot joyously. And so have a good evening.